Hi, good day, everyone. I'm hoping you can hear me. I'm sure someone will tell me if I'm not being broadcast. But welcome to this webinar on behalf of Cell Press. My name is Steve Cranford. I'm the editor-in-chief of Matter, which is the flagship material science journal from Cell Press. We just launched about a year ago, and I'm very excited to be talking about basically Cell Press, our offerings, and how to publish in groundbreaking journals. Before I start the slides, just get some bookkeeping out of the way. I plan on talking for about 45 minutes, maybe if things go a little slow, 50 minutes, to save some time for questions and answers at the end. I believe you can type in your questions as you're watching, and I'll try to get to everything I can at the end. And also, this talk is being recorded, so if you don't get everything here now, you can, come back, rewatch the talk, and save it for later if you wish. So I'll start the slideshow, and hopefully we'll have lots of time for fun Q&A at the end. And I hope it's an informative 45 minutes for everybody who's joining us today. So I hope you can see my slides. Basically, talking today how to publish in groundbreaking journals and the new physical science portfolio from Cell Press. Basically, this is part of a series of talks that Cell Press is giving on our journals and our offerings and how you can contribute to our ecosystem. The title groundbreaking is really great for me because my background's in structural engineering. Typically, when you use groundbreaking, you're thinking maybe innovative or novel. But actually, the origin of the term is from construction. Basically, groundbreaking used to be used when they physically used to break the ground to construct a new building or a bridge or something. And basically, you're building upon something, you're building up something. And I think this is really appropriate for Cell Press because essentially we are building an all science offering for researchers and authors. Cell Press has been around for a while, but our groundbreaking journals really refers to the new offerings we are bringing to the community so we can be a full service kind of academic publisher. So moving on, the talk has basically three main points I want to talk about. A brief introduction to Cell Press. It's going to be a little bit biased to the physical sciences, our new journals, because A, we want to promote those because they're new, and B, that's what I'm involved with, so I'm most familiar. Also a little hint of what's to come, and we are growing. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about manuscript preparation, what you can do as an author to kind of produce the best work that will be considered at Cell Press, talk about how to tell a story and what audience you want to look for. Then once that's submitted, I'm going to talk about the editorial process, basically what we look for, the review process, our decision-making process, and basically the results of, from submission to being accepted to ultimately published. And I'd be remiss not to mention the pandemic and some of the offerings we have for coronavirus and other resources you can go to just to clue up at the end, a short brief, some resources online for those things. So we will start with Cell Press. Obviously, Cell Press is renowned in the life sciences. There's a lot of journals, 26 primary research journals. Most of those are on the biological sciences or the life science side. Obviously, everybody is familiar with cell, but there's also immunity, neuron, developmental cell, cancer cell, a lot of different areas in the biomedical field. Only recently have we kind of expanded into the physical sciences with leading the way with Chem and then followed by Joule. And like I said, Matter, we started about a year ago. And there's also other offerings such as One Earth, Patterns, cell reports and physical sciences and things like this. We also have new offerings kind of more on the clinical side, translational medicine, flagship journal called Med, which is comparable maybe to like the Lancet in terms of scope, and Cell Reports Medicine, which is an open access journal. Obviously, the field is turning towards at least a preference or an option for open access. So we're also expanding those journals, open access if you want. Which is also a great resource for authors if you're looking for citations and things and you don't have the subscriptions to Cell Press, you can turn to our open access materials. We also have trends and reviews journals I'll briefly talk about, particularly trends in chemistry. And also we partner with societies. Probably the most famous is Biophysical Journal, But other academic societies can also contribute and partner with Cell Press if you want a more focused journal, a more niche area. So we're growing in all these stages. Again, it's groundbreaking in the sense we're building up a collection of journals. So Cell Press can be your home no matter what field or what your area of expertise is in, or what you're researching and what you want to find and look up. In particular, we moved into the physical sciences, a big move a few years ago, as well as the earth sciences, with more to come in a few years. So this all started with the launch of Chem, which came out in 2016. Robert Eagling is the editor-in-chief of Chem. He's also a publishing director now at Cell Press. He's also my direct boss, so I will not say anything bad about Robert, but he's a great guy with almost 20 years of experience in publishing, and he basically led the way in the physical sciences at Cell Press for us. So Chem, its second-year impact factor is almost a 20, it's 19.7. It's Prose award-winning in its first year, which is it won for the excellence in physical science and mathematics. And it's a broad-based chemistry journal. So it was a great start into the physical sciences. You basically have to frame your research in terms of the sustainable development goals. Why is the chemistry research basically important to society? So with that kind of outlook, kind of a bigger kind of perspective, that is what Chem is looking for. And they've really led the charge, and is a good platform for us to build upon in terms of the physical sciences. So after Chem, we focused on energy, and Joule was launched in 2017, and it really made a splash in the energy field. So its first year impact factor is almost a 30, it's 27. But the way Joule perspectives it, everything has to be energy first. So, there's lots of works about batteries and perovskites for solar cells. You can find that stuff in Joule. But what they really want is the implications and how things would scale to really influence society. So they're looking at the bigger picture again. So you can see where this is going for basically our physical sciences. We don't just look at the details and the technical things in our journals. We want what's the future implications, how are things going to scale. So Joule is very interesting because some of their most prominent works also focus on commentary and analysis of kind of more the economic impact of energy. So it's a really great resource if you want to get a broad overview of energy research, what's happening in the field, right from the batteries all the way to almost near, climate change and things like that. It's very kind of popular right now, and they have a lot of press release. So I think it's one of our all-star products in terms of being picked up by the New York Times, Popular Science, Washington Post, and it really speaks to how important energy is in the current academic world. Philip Aris is the editor-in-chief of that one, and he's also another publishing director at Cell Press just recently. So editor-in-chiefs of these physical science journals, there's a trend to go publishing director, so there's no pressure on myself, but I'm fairly new at this game. I should also mention that Joule is also a Prose Award winner. So again, no pressure for Matter. Before I talk about Matter itself, I just wanted to mention One Earth. So it's in our physical science portfolio, but it's a little bit different. One Earth, basically, we only have one planet, One Earth, and it tends to encompass any science that has to deal with kind of global issues or environmental grand challenges. So it attempts to integrate the natural, social, and applied science communities and has some very unique perspectives on these issues. So there is some physical science, sustainability science in there, climate change is in there, political commentary. It's basically, if it's important to, the Earth, everything that's going on, and you can frame it in terms of one of these grand challenges, it's a very unique offering. So that is part of us as well. Lewis Collins is the editor-in-chief. So they are looking for contributions kind of from different global regions and things like that. So it's a great option if you're doing anything in the earth sciences. Moving on to Matter, we launched in 2019. Obviously, it's my journal and it's near and dear to my heart. Basically, I came from an academic background. We'll get to that, I believe, in the next slide. But I wanted to start something material science that basically had no agenda, which is one of the reasons we kind of called it matter. That's all encompassing all materials. Basically, anything that matters was the joke in the office, and there's a lot of low-hanging fruit for matter puns. But the aims and scope is broad on purpose. Basically, we'll consider any type of materials from nano to macro, so atomistic or even quantum level, all the way up to applied, more engineering type devices or bulk materials, construction materials, as well as fundamentals to application. So, fundamental physics, condensed matter, we will accept all the way up to more device type things or biomedical applications. So it's a very, very broad scope, which makes it challenging to run a journal like this in terms of which communities you reach out to, but also very exciting because it's very fast moving and there's something different every day. So just have a look at the team, and I'm just going to look at the Matter team, but all of the Cell Press journals are kind of set up the same way. So that's why I want to look at the team Matter and just show how our editorial team is set up. It's not really just a focus on matter itself, but if you look at Chem or Joule, One Earth, or even some of the life sciences side, they are all basically the same. Basically, there's an editor-in-chief. In this case, it's myself. Again, my background, I was a professor at Northeastern University before I joined Cell Press in 2018. Because I was an active researcher, I had over 50 publications. I'm lucky enough to publish in Nature Advanced Materials, but like probably most of the people listening, I've been rejected more often than not from Nature Science Advanced Materials. So I'm very familiar with that process. And I think my background very much complements the backgrounds of the other editors at Cell Press that have gone through more experience in the publishing. So I can bring some of my perspective from academia, and they have a publishing understanding. And there's very good, we contribute in different ways. Again, my background was instructional engineering, mechanics and materials, specifically computational material science, which gave me a broad overview from a lot of materials. But again, everybody has an expertise, so you can't kind of lean on your own. I can't make judgment on every paper. So you build your team as best as you can. And we have 3 full-time scientific editors that work with me. The way it works, Stacy Chin and Jinkai Zhang, they work with me in Cambridge. We share the same office space. And Jikang Sun is in Beijing. So basically, we have a full-time team of 4, and they were hired partially based on their expertise and their enthusiasm for materials, and they all have expertise in different areas. And basically, strategically, we hired him in Beijing. We have now 24-hour coverage for Matter and all your editorial needs. We're growing in China, we're growing globally. We have editors in North America, China. A lot of the other journals have a lot of editors in Europe. Rob and Philip, for example, from Chem and Joule are based in London. So basically, if we had to hire another editor for Matter, it would likely be based in Europe as well. We're trying to get global coverage is the point, and we're trying to get the expertise. But even a small team of 4, we can't cover everything. So we lean on the other teams. We very much work alongside the teams of Chem and Joule, so they each have 4 or 5 people each. So just those 3 journals, you can see now the editorial expertise spans, 12 people. We can ask people on the life science side. Everyone collaborates very closely at Cell Press. So if something that comes in that's not in our wheelhouse, basically we can ask anybody for their opinion or expertise. We also have, each journal has an advisory board of global experts. So ours consists of 80 global members. And again, they are even more involved in the research and active researchers. So if things come in that we can't handle in-house that we need opinions on, we can reach out to our advisory board members. So even though you're thinking maybe Matter is only a team of 4, how can they understand my research? We have vast resources to check on, the technical quality, how exciting it is, and things like this. So moving on, if we want to look at materials a little bit closer, Matter again was broad scope from fundamentals to application, nano to macro. So how do we kind of organize this in a framework because what's our aims and scope and what do we consider at matter? So if you consider materials, there's a material research pathway. Basically from fundamentals, a new idea or innovation, you discover something in the lab. You have to understand that through maybe fundamental chemistry or physics. You move on to the traditional material science aspects of it, the structure, processing, performance type paradigm to characterize these materials. And then you put those materials in potential applications. Maybe you have a new battery material, maybe it's a new fire resistant material or something that ultimately has societal impact. So there's a chain of research that goes on here. And if you want to think about it, what we want to link is basically discovery to societal impact. So what is your material going to do in terms of changing the world? So if you want to think of a study itself, at each stage of this is like a snapshot. Each article is like a photograph that happens along this pathway. So all the way, the new idea to the application. We have all these snapshots, all these photos. And if you consider one issue of matter, it's basically like a photo album. It's a bunch of snapshots for a bunch of different events that consider a material and it's part of the pathway. And I just took you can also recognize this kind of photo album if you look at kind of antique photos. I just took an example of a wedding here. You can also look at old antique papers. And one of my favorite examples is the canonical carbon nanotube paper from Nature in 1991. Helical microtubules of graphitic carbon. Doesn't even call them carbon nanotubes. So it looks dated, but that's the way it was in 1991. So it's a snapshot in time. And this was very much at the time a new innovation or discovery that has led to a lot of applications. So this was kind of like the first snapshot for carbon nanotubes. So we wanted a way to kind of quantify that and kind of make sense of all these snapshots and put them in order. And what we did is we took all these snapshots and said, hey, we basically want to put them and classify them. And we came up with this idea for the MAP scale, MAP, which stands for Material Advancement and Progression. So basically, it's a 6-point scale that goes from discovery to kind of application. And every paper that gets submitted gets assigned one of these numbers. The authors can suggest it, but ultimately the editorial team is the one that has final say. So if it's a brand new material or new phenomenon, it gets a number 1. It's a discovery. If it's a new material, but it's a benchmark study, so say you're assessing the strength of the material for the first time, or you have a high performance, some sort of maybe perovskite that has great quantum efficiency, then it's a benchmark study. And you can see it progresses from discovery to benchmark, more understanding of the material, demonstration in an application, improving or optimizing maybe that application, to final number 6 is technology development. So there could be some overlap in our definitions, but basically there is a trend that goes from discovery to societal impact. Again, the rarest ones are fundamental discoveries. There's not new materials invented every day. So you can see a distribution of the papers we get in. This is a selection of papers from last year. Our bread and butter is number 3s and 4s, more understanding and kind of demonstration for applications, where 1 and 6 are kind of less common. And we assign these to every paper. So on the right here is just an email of a recent table of contents. And you can see that each paper has its associated MAP scale designation. And so if you're more interested in applications, you want to look for the 4s and the 5s and the 6s. If you're more maybe chemistry and physics oriented, fundamental sciences, you're looking at the 1s and the 2s. So we think it's a very useful way to seek out the papers and what's interested. And when the years to come, we can kind of track how quickly some materials got developed, maybe some stagnated at steps 3 and 4, and things like this. And it will be very good for data analytics. Going on from that, we're hoping that maybe the MAP scale be picked up, particularly in some other journals in the ecosystem at Cell Press. So just a few other journals to talk about, including Cell Reports Physical Science. So maybe one day, Luke Batchelor is the editor-in-chief of Cell Reports Physical Science, and maybe he'll adopt the MAP scale. Cell Reports Physical Science is our open access offering in the physical sciences. So it kind of reaches across the scopes of chem and joule and matter, as well as other fields. So if open access is necessary, you can publish here. It also publishes a little bit more quantity. So there's going to be a lot of exciting works coming out of Cell Reports Physical Science. Just cluing up on the kind of physical science offerings, we also have Trends in Chemistry. Our Trends series is shorter reviews, more timely, rather than these large kind of authoritative 100-page reviews. They're about 10 pages long, and because of that, they can be produced very quickly. So Tom Durst tries to recruit very timely perspectives in chemistry mostly, but obviously materials chemistry, physical chemistry, things like this. There's broad overlap with all the physical sciences. And these are, I find, very enjoyable to read because they're more focused than a broad overview. It's not like a full literature review. They typically make a great point and are very forward-looking. So I believe we're expanding our offerings in this as well, with more things to come, perhaps a trends in materials or trends in energy or something like that. We're always brainstorming what kind of offerings to give to the community. Beyond physical sciences, and I can speak less about these, again, we are growing. The groundbreaking I'll go back to is we're constructing kind of a portfolio collection of titles. So this includes more open access, which the community wants, as well as more medically focused journals. So basically, in terms of med and Cell Reports medicine, again, those are probably a little bit more clinically applied. If you're a physician or doing any kind of clinical research, those are great venues to kind of submit to. Cell Reports, our reports, Cell Reports kind of title implies it's open access. So right now there's Cell Reports Medicine, Cell Reports in general, and Cell Reports Physical Sciences. We also have recently just launched Patterns, which is our first foray into data science. So data analytics, computational science, things like this. So that's very interesting as well. And I believe there's going to be overlap and we can partner. So say you have a big study that deals with materials informatics, you can publish probably the materials characterization part in Matter, and Patterns can handle a partner piece on how the data was handled or the algorithms and something like this. We also have iScience, which is a broad open access journal that spans the physical sciences and the life sciences. So I think the intent of the I in iScience is interdisciplinary, but you can also consider it innovative or interesting or whatever you want that I to be. iScience publishes very exciting works that kind of, it's hard to define. So we needed a catch-all, particularly for those multidisciplinary transformative works. Star Protocols is basically similar to like a methodology journal. If you have a new process in the lab or something, you go to Star Protocols so you can basically publish the step-by-step so other labs can use it. And we also have society-based journals that are kind of partner journals. Again, if they're a little bit more focused or niche. So the innovation is partnered with the Youth Innovation Promotion Association in China. So it's a broad scope journal, kind of slanted a little bit towards the younger PI community in China, but also accepts papers from other people. HGG Advances is from the American Association of Human Genetics Society. So they also, that's more, again, you can tell, human genetics and genomics, they're a little bit more focused, but they also add, these are all open access, so they add to the collection of CellPress offerings. At the end of the day, basically, if you submit anything, our goal is to have an option for all fields of science at CellPress, and ultimately have perhaps a subscription option or an open access option to satisfy the needs of every author. So that is basically the quick and dirty summary of what we have to offer at CellPress. But that's only part of the story. I mean, these are from the publishing. This is just our titles. What we really want to do part of this webinar series is basically give you some tips and pointers of what we look for and how to prepare a manuscript. So basically, you're in the lab, you do the work, you have the results. Ultimately, you want to get published. You need something on your CV. So how do you do this? What's the best benefit? Does science really happen if nobody else reads it? So questions to answer before you write. It's not so much, obviously we want to disseminate science. That's why we publish. That's why we want people to read our science, use it for their own science, and basically build upon the knowledge base of academia. But why do you want to publish your work? What does it contribute to the knowledge base? I mean, so you have to ask yourself some questions. Basically, what's new that have you done? What are you contributing? It doesn't have to be as innovative as you think. Are you supporting someone else's work? Are you just adding another kind of data set to the bulk? Or is it innovative? Is it really novel? We look at both things, and we do accept both things across our journals. What was the problem? Anything challenging in your work? What did you overcome? What did you develop? And basically, what's your audience? What's the topic? Obviously, there's some topics that are very trending right now. Currently, I mean, the most timely topic is COVID and coronavirus. But just because you put coronavirus in the title does not make it a great groundbreaking work. And then, have you provided solutions to some difficult problems? Can it translate to other people's kind of approaches? Can your solution also be used to solve someone else's problem in the lab or in an application or something? Is it interesting? That's basically what, will it be useful to the scientific community? And if the answer is a yes, is it going to be useful, even if it's to a small subset, then yes, you should definitely publish and you should put in the work to make a manuscript. So then you got to pick the right journal. And I showed a lot of journals, but there's even more. Basically, there's hundreds, if not thousands of journals in the community. So what is right for you? You have to know your audience, and this comes from after some practice. If you're a younger PI or a postdoc, it's getting out into the community, going to conferences, not so much anymore, but attending webinars, and listening to basically the community that you want to reach out to and publish in, and see where they're publishing. There's great society journals. There's other people that publish different works. Is it going to be of interest to those societies, or is it more broad interest? Do you want to speak to someone who really, really will understand your expertise, or is this something that applies to cross-disciplinary nature? So depending on what your audience is, you can choose a few journals, read their aims and scope, check what they've published in recent journals for similar topics, things like that. A great place to look is your own citations. That will teach you as a guide. We do check that as editors. We're not looking so much for impact of the journals. I don't look at the citations to see if they're only citing works in science and nature, but it will tell you about the communities and where they're coming from in terms of aims and scope and background. We've been doing this, and we handle a lot of papers, so the editors will know. So one of the worst things to do is to submit to the wrong journal and get rejected just based on scope, because that'll hurt your chances for future submissions at that journal. It's a bad impression. But feel free to reach out to the editors and ask about aims and scope. All our emails are there online, so that we will know, and we'll typically know where to point you in the right direction as well. If it's not appropriate for matter, I might suggest Chem. I might suggest Jewel. I might, if I'm in a good mood, suggest an ACS journal, but not too many of those because we like to keep them in-house. So why particularly would you like to publish at Cell Press? Basically, I think we have a goal and kind of an in-house paradigm to treat the authors right. I mean, that sums it up. We're full-time professional editors, which technically means we have no agenda. We only want to promote your science. We don't, I stopped publishing when I joined Cell Press. So I don't do any active research anymore. I'm a little biased sometimes with some of the stuff that really piques my interest in terms of my former research, but I try to get over that. And we really just want to promote the best works from the broadest possible communities. So with that, we want to serve the authors. So we try to be extremely quick, timely decisions and review process. Our goal across Cell Press from submission to publication is 3 months. So about 12 weeks. We try to do that, and we think we've reached that goals at a lot of the journals. We try to be as responsive and hospitable as possible. This is our full-time job, and our full-time job is not to ignore authors. It is to respond to you guys. So if you send me any email inquiry, we will get back to you, typically within a couple days. And with that, we maintain high standards. We know what our journals are trying to achieve, but that doesn't mean that we are pompous. You know, if we reject you, we still want your paper to end up in the most appropriate journal, which is one of the reasons we're expanding our offerings. We want to make sure it finds the right home, and then we serve the community. So with all that, I mean, we like to experiment and innovate. I hope that comes through in some of our things like the map scale, and some of our interesting pieces, but that comes with kind of the bulk of what we produce per journal. So what makes a good manuscript? I mean, the main thing is the message is sending, right? So you want everybody to understand what you did and why is it important. Everything else is doing that in terms of putting it together piece by piece. So the scientific message is clear, useful, and exciting. Obviously, you want it as exciting as possible, but you don't want to oversell that. You want to be justified by the data that's contained within the manuscript. It has to be put together so it's logical. It has to make sense to whoever's reading it. So, you know, the conclusions are logical. You are way more intimate with your own research than the typical editor or reviewer. So sometimes you might skip some things that you know that is implied or assumed. And if that doesn't come through in the manuscript, it won't be understood. And then pick the right format. Maybe it's a letter, a report, or a little bit longer. And again, written in a cohesive manner that transmits. So it's kind of, it comes with experience, but there is a few tips. There's all these pieces that come together that we'll talk about, the title, the abstract. But the most important thing that I like to think is what's the story? Basically, any written work, whether it's a poem or a short story or a novel or a scientific manuscript, I mean, it tells a story. You're telling a story to an audience. You have to have almost a 3-act structure where you pose a problem, and then your results and discussion is almost the middle act where there's conflict, and then at the end, the conclusion, there's resolution, and you have to take the reader through that story. It's a little bit different than how it might have actually worked in the lab, but you want to make sure that everything makes sense, and at the end of the day, when they finish the paper, the audience knows your plot. So it has to be a nice flowing story, logical layout. You don't want tangents where you don't want to introduce extra things that don't add to your conclusions, that make it confusing, things like that. So, I mean, the most important thing is basically get all the data done, sketch it out, and then once you have a draft and you have all your pieces, give it to somebody, read it, does it make sense? And then rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it. I mean, you should have 3 or 4 full drafts at least of a paper to get all the best kind of work and the clearest, most concise draft. Once you write your first draft, my advice is then take that first draft and cut it down by about 20 to 25%. Because once you put in all the pieces, you'll realize that you don't need all the sentences, all the data. It's probably you want to cut it down to make it as clear and concise as possible. So before we get into a few of these pieces, I mean, I'd just like to show this slide, what people consider what is a good manuscript. And obviously, what I'm showing here is diamonds. So obviously, people want a polished, very fancy, very attractive manuscript. And a lot of people consider their manuscript to be like diamonds. That is not the case. That is not what we're looking for. If it's polished too much, if it's probably overstating what's in the paper. If you spend too much time making it look good, it's probably not fundamentally as important as you may have thought. It should come out in the details how important it is. So the other picture here is actually just a powder of graphene, which is also, if I'm comparing to diamonds, it's also carbon. So graphene and diamonds are actually the same material, but one is very polished, very attractive, and the other one looks like a pile of soot. But if you follow materials science research, graphene is the much more interesting material. It has more applications, more interesting properties, more interesting phenomena happens in graphene. And, to have a look at it, the details and why it's important are in the little itty bitty pieces. The editors will look at those itty bitty pieces to see where the story is. So you're not looking for the diamond, you are looking for the graphene. That's why I want to show this slide. So what are those little itty bitty pieces? You have to consider all of them. One of the first things that you should not overlook is a cover letter. So the cover letter, which you have to submit, when you give it to the editor, is one of your only chances to be a little bit subjective and opinionated and try to sell your work. So the cover letter should, describe why it's a good fit for the journal, fits within the aims and scope, give any additional background, maybe how it fits into a larger project or something like that. Give any pertinent information about, competition or prior submissions, obviously reviewer suggestions and exclusions. But it should frame the work of why it's interesting. Why should it be exciting to the reader? Don't just have a cover letter with an abstract or prior publications. We know that we're going to look that up. Likely we're going to look up your profile page on Google Scholar, or likely we're going to look up your faculty page or something like that. What you want to do in the cover letter is basically do an elevator pitch and excite me about the work. And you can, try to be enthusiastic about it, be a little bit different, and catch the eye of the editor. So in terms of the manuscript, what you want to do is be careful of the language. It has to be very cohesive, a single piece. I go back to the story. So write out the draft, tell the story, but then look at the details. So cut it down, draft, redraft. So make sure it fits the guide for the authors, any specific guidelines that the journal has. Make sure it's as short as possible, and make sure all the sentences are checked. So this comes into redrafting. Give it to a colleague, give it to a peer, basically do a cursory review before you submit it for review. If we move on to titles, there's lots of little hints with titles, basically succinct as possible. You want those keynotes. If you think about the title, this is what's going to come up when people search for papers, whether that's Google or whether that's Scopus. So they're going to read, whoa. Okay, sorry, there's a little hitch in Bright Talk. So whether it's Google or whether it's Scopus, the title is the first thing that comes up. You want your keywords in the title. You want it as broad as possible to cast a wide net to get readership, but you don't want it too broad. So it's very much threading a needle. Beyond the title, there's also writing the abstract. So write a clear abstract. Again, we have length limits on this, so it depends on the journal, but usually there are 200 words, maybe 300 words at most. Have your most exciting findings in the abstract. You don't have to include all your findings in the abstract, but make it as exciting as possible. Think about it as a teaser for a movie, maybe a trailer for a movie. You want to bring in the reader. You can leave some dangling information so they have to read the paper, but you don't want to omit anything that's important, because you think about it on Scopus or maybe PubMed or something like that. It is the title and the abstract that you'll be looking at that serves as kind of your profile for the paper. I'm actually writing an editorial on the importance of titles for the next issue of Matter, and I was looking at on Tinder, which is a dating app. People decide whether they like or dislike someone's dating profile on an average of 7 seconds. So if you're doing a Google search for academic papers, you can think about that as well, that they're probably not going to spend much more than 7 seconds looking at your title and your abstract to see if it's a useful paper or not. So you really have to catch people in and bring them into your paper almost immediately. Then you get to your introduction, and again, your introduction, you got to set up all the pieces. So where is your problem? Set up the field, the problem you're addressing, and basically pitch up the solution you're going to attempt. So this is where you kind of, introduce the problem and where it's going to go. Your results is probably the easiest thing to write because you should have all your data and your results at hand, and you're just basically saying what you found and what you did. So make sure not to get too lengthy. Make sure to keep on track. You want to guide the reader through the results, not just bombard them with data. If you're going to bombard with data, that's what supplementary information is for. So keep things interesting, show the key results, tell the story through the results, and make sure you take some time on those figures and illustrations and plots. And that way you tell the story through the results. So you went from the introduction that pitches the problem, and now you're solving that problem. In terms of the data preparation, and this is basically the plots and tables and things like that, make sure they're clear to somebody who hasn't seen the data before. So you might be intimate that, you know, which curve is which, but make sure someone who hasn't seen it before can understand it. And this is informative captions, nice clear fonts, large enough to read. Look at the format that the journal is going to be in, if they're going to shrink your figures in any way, black and white versus color figures, things like that. At the end, you basically tie it all together with discussion and conclusion. So if your introduction is right, you set up the problem, and then if your results, you're solving the problem, and now in the discussion conclusion, you're telling me why it's important. So make sure to make this complete and kind of fully resolved. If you set up any results, talk about it in the discussion, say why it's important, compare your results with other results in the field, and don't leave any dangling threads. I mean, if there's a figure 3 that you showed in the results and you don't talk about figure 3 in the discussion, why did you put figure 3 into your paper? So make sure it's a nice, tight discussion that covers all points. In terms of your references, I mean, most papers now cite about 40 to 50 references. Just be careful that they're all valuable. You don't want that to explode to about 80 references. And the only note here is be careful of your self-citations. We do look at that. It's not a great thing to do. I like to say a good researcher cites themselves only when necessary, but a great researcher makes themselves necessary to cite. So you can put yourself in there a couple times if it is relevant, but if you're only self-citing a lot of your own citations or from one particular group, it doesn't bode well. You want to be more appealing and hit more groups, both in terms of expertise as well as global distribution. And finally, to conclude off with acknowledgements, just make sure to acknowledge anyone who helped you. I'm waiting for the day where someone acknowledges the editor who handled the paper, but until that day comes, just make sure to acknowledge particularly your funding source, the reviewers you can throw in there, and anyone who helped prepare the results. So a few minutes left, quickly go through the editorial process, which once you have your manuscript prepared, the process it goes through at Cell Press. It's pretty streamlined. Basically, you have a manuscript submission. It cuts to the editor first. We make an initial assessment whether to reject without review or send out for review. Once it goes out for review, that could take maybe 2 or 3 weeks. It comes back with the reports. We again look at those reports in the context of the entire story, and we can recommend to either accept or some minor revisions or major revisions, or we can reject it at that point as well. At any point during that process, we can also recommend transfer to another journal if we think it's more appropriate. And if it's accept, it moves on to basically the production stage, which is a little bit independent of any kind of decision making. So basically, once it comes in and submission, it's in the editor's hands. Right now, we're doing everything by team at Matter. So we discuss every paper and everybody reads every article that comes in. If we don't have the expertise, again, we get feedback from our advisory board. We make a decision as kind of a vote with, I have veto power if need be. But basically, we make the decision to reject or send out for review. If we reject, we typically like to put an explanation why, whether it fit the aims and scope or not. If not, or we send it out for review and then we move on to the next step. If there's any, I'm going to talk about appeals after the review process. So if you don't like our reason why for rejection, you can feel free to appeal the decision, but that starts a whole other process. When we send it out for review, obviously we ask for reviewers to evaluate the technical quality of the data. The data supports the conclusions, but we also do ask to evaluate the potential impact in the field. So is this high enough quality? Will it garner enough general interest across, say, for matter, particularly for material science, for the field, rather than just technical quality of the work? So they will evaluate that, and we could reject based on lack of novelty or advancement or things like this. But basically, we ask them to review it as is. And if you recommend any excluded reviewers, we will honor that request. If we invite you to review, we just ask that you basically adhere to the timeline. If we're going to ask for 2 or 3 week review, please do so within that timeline. But also, if you need more time, that's okay. Just reach out and ask. There's nothing that we hate more than looking at that the reviewer is late and we can't get in touch with the reviewer. So if you agree for a 3-week review and it's week 4, please reach out if you still plan on doing it and let us know that you're going to need another week or whatever. Or if you can't do it, that's fine too. But the communication is key. In terms of the responsibilities of a reviewer, we just commit to the timeline, commit to confidentiality, be constructive, don't be too negative in your reviews. Basically, review the paper as you would want your reviews to come into yourself. Once we get the reviews back, it's time for the editorial decision. So we look at basically our own editorial insights along with the referee reports, try to make a responsible decision, and try to be in the best interest of the author. So it's the balance of technical issues with conceptual interest is interesting. Does it have broad appeal, or is it more kind of niche? Something we like to consider. But at the end of the day, we make the decision and we hope that everybody's happy with it. And if you're not, basically, this is not the appeal slide. Sorry. What is this? Rendering decision. Sorry, everybody. Yeah, so basically this is just continuing our decision-making process where we render a decision, basically is it minor revisions, major revisions, and guide the author along the way. So when you revise your paper, basically address every point to the reviewers and include a point-by-point response. If you don't think it's going to add value, that's okay too, but still respond to it and basically assert why. Any kind of major omissions or additions, you can also discuss with the editor prior to resubmission. But what we only want the revisions to help tell your story. So if it goes off on a tangent just because the reviewer said so, that doesn't benefit the paper or the author, so it's not necessary. So make your revisions count, contact editors, and then resubmit point by point a letter addressing. So that resubmission, the point by point letter is key upon resubmission. That's what we look at the most to see what you've changed and how you address the comments of the reviewers. We can also, again, we can transfer, but hopefully if all goes well, we accept. If you receive a negative decision, again, you can appeal it. Take a couple days, don't do it immediately. Read our decision letter and why we may have rejected it. If you're going to appeal, you have to provide a point-by-point response to the reviewer's concerns, so still revise your manuscript. Don't take it personally, stick to the scientific issues, and we take all appeals seriously, rebuttals. We don't like them because it basically says, we made the wrong decision. But we're human. We do make incorrect decisions. So if you think you have a good case scientifically, you can go for it. After acceptance, it's time to celebrate. Yes, you're accepted, but there's still a little bit more work. We have a pre-accept stage where you got to make sure basically everything fits the format in terms of citations, reference formatting, figure formatting, things like that. So organize your files. We have checklists provided, and then you could resubmit and then it's final acceptance. And then within a week after final acceptance, I believe, or maybe a couple weeks, it will appear online. So the last section I just want to go through, and I'm a little bit over, I'm approaching 50 minutes. Basically, after assessing a bunch of papers, we were rejecting a lot of good works, and there was common reasons we were rejecting. So my associate editor and myself, Stacy and me, we wrote a matter of opinion article, an op-ed about 4 archetype reasons for editorial rejection that we commonly saw at Matter. So basically, I mean, we only publish about 10 to 12 papers per month, and we get a lot more submissions than that. So we limit the numbers, which means we reject a lot of good works that are actually great science that we actually enjoy, but we have to reject them just because it's a numbers game. Typically, we transfer down to maybe Cell Reports Physical Science or something and find a home for those papers, but we just can't publish everything. So there's a lot of types of papers that we see that are kind of common that we reject, and 4 in particular that I just want to mention. So number 1 is the substitution. So basically, if your study is very similar to a past study, but you're just changing one component or parameter, then it's basically a substitution paper. So it could be a really great study, but if it's just a substitution, there's not that novelty that we want to see. And you can go to previous studies to get so this is frequent in metal organic frameworks. Basically, if you're using the same framework, but you're just substituting the metal ion or maybe organic linker, but you get kind of the same chemistry material, you're just substitution. So it's not, it doesn't have that interest beyond just a new addition to MOFs. Another one is graphene doping. So the concept is the same, even if the dopant differs. And there was a great paper that exemplifies this that came out in ACS Nano. Well, any crap we put into graphene increases electrocatalytic effect. And basically, this is just substituting a lot of different dopants on the graphene, and they all increases electrocatalytic effect. So it was just a substitution study, but it's a clear marker if there's prior studies and it's substituting just one little thing different that we're probably going to reject it. Number 2 is incremental. Now, science is based on kind of incremental works, but we want those step size to be better, to be bigger, to be kind of more creative. So what is the motivation behind this step, and the size of the step is what we're going to look at. It's kind of subjective for sure. Frequent offender is the energy field. Battery efficiency is improved via addition of maybe a small interlayer, a dopant, or increased porosity, but the underlying phenomena doesn't change. You're just changing one electrolyte for another. You're not really giving the community anything of interest that they can build upon. So we do a lot of rejections for incremental work as well. Another one we like to call A plus B. Basically, A plus B equals A plus B. If you're combining 2 materials that have different behaviors and your result is a system that has the same behavior of the 2 materials, you're not really showing anything of interest. So frequent offender here is like you're adding magnetic nanoparticles to a system, maybe a soft hydrogel, and then your soft hydrogel is now magnetically controlled. It's like, well, that's kind of obvious because you put magnetic nanoparticles into it. So you're not showing any new phenomena or any synergistic effects. You're just adding 2 things together, and the result is the sum of those 2 things. So we want something that, is exponential or complementary, not just, combining 2 effects. And finally, the super niche, which sometimes are the hardest. So we're a broad material science by design. So we want to reach the widest possible audience that's interested in the work. But if your work is super niche, it might be really, really great science. It just has limited appeal. So, it's a super, super, detailed physics paper, but that's not going to appeal to anyone who doesn't have, access to I know I'm running out of time. I only have a few more slides. So I think we should be good. So the 4 archetype rejections, we did a little comic in our paper, and we just compared them to cooking metaphors. So the substitution, obviously, if you just add a new kind of ingredient into an omelet, it's still an omelet. Same with a hot dog, the incremental. If you top it with another hot dog or another kind of topping or condiment, it's still a hot dog. The A plus B is putting things together that don't really belong together, nothing new. And the super niche, obviously, is something that just can only be interest to a small community. So these are just 4 that we see. There are definitely more than 4. They're just common ones that are warning signs and submissions of matter. That doesn't mean your paper will completely be killed if it fits into a category. Again, it's completely subjective. It's just that we group them in these a lot, and it's kind of our short. We actually put in our notes it's an A+B paper, or it's incremental or something like that. That doesn't mean don't submit to us if you think it is, and it doesn't mean if we're rejected because of these reasons it's a bad paper. It's just some of the things, some of the warning signs that we see. So finally, clue up additional resources. Obviously, with the state of the pandemic in the world, Cell Press is making everything that's COVID or coronavirus related open access across all of our journals. So cell.com/COVID-19. So if you're interested or doing research in those areas, feel free to check out that collection. You can see the numbers of papers in these categories, 4 or 5. I think this snapshot was taken a while ago because these are definitely now in the more in the tens and dozens of papers in each category. So we just want to provide that for the extent of the pandemic. In terms of more information about the journals, obviously everything is at cell.com. We invite everybody to recommend our content to your libraries, so you can find that at cell.com/recommend. And some of these tips and editorial tips and takes, particularly at Matter, some of our editorials, we are trying to provide a little bit more to the community rather than just the research. So if you go to cell.com/matter/collections, you can find some of our non-research articles that are community focused and have some editorial tips and takes. We're trying to, just some PDFs you can download and things, similar topics that I've talked to on these slides, and we're trying to grow that collection as we proceed. So that is the end of my slides. Thanks for your attention. I think there's a lot of questions, and I think we might be able to extend, I guess, the timing of this in 5 minutes. I have no other plans, so I think, we've been going for 57 minutes by the clock, but I can definitely start taking questions. If I look at them, I will go, I'll get my help for questions. And we'll try to do as many as possible. Okay, the first question is, could you provide an example of a reason for appeal to negative decision? Yeah, so, well, there's lots of reasons to appeal to a negative decision. The most common one is that the authors disagree with the reviewers. That is not a great reason. If you just come in and say, I disagree with the response of reviewer number 2, they didn't like our logic, or they didn't like a result that showed in figure number 3, but we think it's, we're perfectly clear, that's not going to be a good appeal. What good appeals is basically if there was a misunderstanding. If we reject based on the fact that the review comes in, say it's a submission to Matter, and then the reviewer comes in that says, there was a similar work published in Advanced Materials last year on the same topic, and they give us the paper in Advanced Materials. And we're looking for novelty, and if there's similar works, that's a reason that we'll maybe transfer or reject or something like that. If you can appeal and say, well, our work differs in 1, 2, and 3, these areas, and you justify that it's a different work and it has novelty, we will gladly, accept that appeal. Other times there's misinterpreted results, simple things that they didn't like, they didn't consider temperature effects, but maybe the temperature effects were in the supplementary material and the reviewers did not comment on that or something like that. So basically it's if the reviewers made a misstep or a logical mistake, but not just opinion oriented. Ooh, I think you can see me now. So I hope that helps. There's more, but it's almost case by case basis. So it's hard to say exactly what appeals are good and successful and which appeals are not. How do you prioritize the papers when there are multiple authors writing on the same topic? So this is, I guess, if we get a perovskite paper from multiple groups that are working on perovskites, or maybe it could be any material, obviously. I mean, we don't prioritize any individuals or any institutions. If the work is acceptable and novelty, it goes to the top of the pile. We sometimes, if they come in, if the timing is odd and the papers are submitted at the exact same time, we will actually send out papers as a pair, particularly if they're very similar. It's some communities are large, some communities are small, so that, you know, it depends. Being aware of, I guess, who you're up against is also being aware. But we don't prioritize. We tend to assess the manuscripts. We try without looking at the particular authors or individuals and make the decisions independent of that. Obviously, that's difficult. If we get something submitted by a Nobel Prize winner, that is definitely going to turn our heads and pique our interest. But we have also rejected Nobel Prize winners, and we like a lot of the innovation and very interesting ideas come from less established PIs. So definitely, you know, we don't prioritize based on individuals. We just like to go whatever benefits the scientific community the most. Next question, how can you go about contacting journal editors? All of our emails are on the individual website. They're kind of buried there. If you go to the Matter homepage, up in the top right, there's about the journal. Through that menu, there's definitely the editorial team. All the journals are set up that way. So that you can send us a direct email. We will respond. Feel free to email me directly, email any of my editors directly. We're also active on social media. I'm on WeChat. I'm on Twitter. So you can reach out that way. So we invite the contact. It's part of our job. We don't want, you know, it's not just through submissions. We get pre-subs all the time, conversations. It's exciting. I like interacting with the community. So just email me. I think, yeah, find it on the website, cell.com/matter. What is your advice for future academicians? So I like to think through your publishing, there's a couple things. What you want is you want a cohesive story. So I know when I was, if I had my time back, and everyone says if they have their time back, you know, you do things differently. I did a lot of different work in different areas, and I was trying to find kind of different stuff that was fun. But it didn't tell a cohesive story. So what you want to do, no matter what area you're in, and even if you're doing different topics, you want to be able to connect those topics to a cohesive story so you emerge as an expert at something. I kind of like to link it to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There's a lot of movies going on. If you watch Thor, it's different than you watch the Hulk. It's different than you watch the Ant-Man. But eventually they all come together in Avengers. So if you're doing different topics and publishing in different journals, make sure there's an underlying story there, whether it's the approach you use or the application or something, that it's all telling one giant story. And if you look at most of the established PIs with, great H indices, which is only one metric, but, that is one, they have an underlying story that they are known for a particular thing. So try to build on that. It's difficult and it takes a lot of work, but stick to your own story and what interests you, and then make it fun. How to become a Matter reviewer? The Matter reviewer, reach out to us. Sometimes this has happened. Send us your CV. You don't have to have a full CV. Send us a paragraph, a little bio sketch. Who you are, where you're from, and what your expertise is in. We are always looking for reviewers. It's probably what we spend most of our time on is trying to search for reviewers. That being said, if right now, energy materials are dominating the material space. So if you are also doing batteries, we have tons of people in that space. That doesn't mean that we won't invite you to review, but if you send us your CV and stuff, and then we don't invite you to review for a month, don't worry about it. We'll get to you. There's just so many people to choose from. If you're more niche and we get papers in, we will reach out to you probably multiple times. So it all depends on what you're doing. But reach out, email. We have a spreadsheet where we keep lists of potential reviewers and all stages of careers. Doesn't matter. We even send out sometimes to postdocs, depending where their expertise is. But mostly we like tenure track, early PIs, mid-career, even the more experts. So reach out to any of the editors, particularly myself. What are the factors that can cause So next question, what are the factors that can cause manuscript retraction in any cell press journal? Retraction is a different story. Retraction occurs with unethical behavior. So if there's any kind of plagiarism or misstated data or figures, misrepresented data or figures, that will cause retraction. Mistakes happen. So if there was a calculation error or you did some data analytics, that would cause a retraction. I'm fairly new at this, and Matter has not had to deal with a retraction yet, but they do occur in the community. So basically, we like to think that the ethical stuff doesn't happen on purpose, but other than the ethical stuff, plagiarism or things like that, it's just mistakes. So if you did some analysis wrong or your code was incorrect or something, and you found a result that was not correct, that would cause a retraction. If it's fixable, you're just off by a few, we can do corrections, but that would not be a full-fledged retraction. The next question, what are the chances of publication for a study conducted 2 to 3 years back? So the actual work was conducted 2 to 3 years back. It all depends on the field. Different materials, different fields move a lot quicker. So obviously if it was 2 to 3 years back in perovskites, you're 2 to 3 years too late. That field changes almost monthly in terms of efficiency values and what has to be. If it's more slowly moving field, polymer science is a little bit slower moving. Construction materials for sure. We get some papers on even new types of concrete. That's fine. It's all when it gets published, will it be new to the community? So if the work was done 2 to 3 years back, we would definitely consider it. Science isn't dated. Science is only as new as much as it's being used. So that's fine. Just send it in. If there's a reason why it's 2 or 3 years delayed, maybe it's PhD work that's yet to be done or something like that, put that in the cover letter. We'll take that into consideration. Next question, what should be the standard time taken for the publication once you submit your manuscript? So from submission to online publication, our target is 3 months. So that's basically a week for editorial consideration, 2 to 3 weeks for review. Then that's about a month, 3 weeks to 4 weeks for revision, another week to make sure it's editorial accepted, and then it goes into production, and then it comes out online. So 3 months is the goal. I think it depends on the journal, it depends on the reviewers, it depends on the amount of major or minor revisions. We've had things come out in as quick as 5 weeks, I think is our record at Matter. And obviously some things, if it's major revisions and you need to go back into the lab, it takes, from submission to publication over a year. But our goal is for the process 3 months. Next question is, many high-profile journals desk reject about 80% of submission, and then they will accept about 50% of peer-reviewed papers. Do you follow the same model, and if yes, why? Okay, so there's a few things. Our model is to publish, our target is to publish 10 to 12 papers a month. That's just based on our model. So it's independent of how many submissions we get. So to get that 10 to 12 paper target, obviously if we get 100 submissions, we are going to end up rejecting about 85% of those. Desk rejecting, and we send out about, we want to get 10 papers, we basically send out whatever we like for review. Once we send out for review, we assume that we like it enough to be published. There is no target of 50% rejection after review. Once we send it out for review, our approach is that we want it in the journal. Now, we do reject after review, but actually we are more about 75% accepted after review because we reject more at that level. So it's not so much we have targets about how much we desk reject and how much we reject after review. It's about maintaining that that low throughput, only 10 to 12 per month. That being said, if you look at the past issues of Matter, our goal is 10 to 12. We've been actually publishing 12 to 14. It's because we like the papers. If a paper comes in and we've already sent out 12 for the month, I'm not going to reject it because we've already met our quota. If it's good science, we send it out for review, and if it's good science, we're going to publish it. So if our papers grow to 15 articles per issue because the quality is there, I have no problem with that. If there's only 6 good papers in a month and we reject everything else, I have no problem with that. It's basically, is it exciting? Is it going to interest the community? And is there a reason to reject or a reason to accept? I think we're almost out of time. There's one more question. Let me know how much time we have. So if one is interested in writing a review article, how to go about it. Okay, so review articles. So we have 2 types of review at Matter, and it depends on which journal. It's iffy. So we have full review articles and perspectives. So we do solicit 80% of our review articles. So we reach out to experts in the field and invite them to write reviews. The other 20% are probably proposed to us. And we're very open for reviews. They typically, as long as the topic is kind of nice and we don't have one in the pipeline already, we like people contributing because it's typically a different perspective. It doesn't have to be fully written, or it could be. We get them both ways. So again, reach out to us, communicate. You can send us a fully written draft of a review if you want, or you can send us an idea of a review you want to write in 6 months. If it's nice and you're going to be, thorough and everything, we typically accept the reviews. The major reason for rejection of reviews is because we have something similar in the pipeline, or there's something that just got released in Nature Reviews materials that is almost identical to what you're proposing. So if you think something's different, valuable to the community, and will be well received, we will almost guarantee we can publish it in Matter. Almost guaranteed. There's also, considerations of how many reviews we can publish. So there's other considerations, but we're definitely interested. So reach out, communicate again. Could be a draft, could be an outline, could be an idea. Let me know what it is, and we will accept or reject accordingly. Next question. Has it happened that a manuscript is transferred to a newly launched journal to encourage the journal? However, as an author, I want to publish in a high-impact journal. We all want to publish in a high-impact journal. How to decide which journal to publish in such a case? We all play the same game. I used to do it when I was a professor too. Basically, you should have a relative feel of where your paper should go in terms of impact. But everybody wants to publish in the highest impact journals. So whether that's Science or Nature or Jewel or Matter or Cell or whatever, you want to aim for the top. Go for it. It's another submission. I would recommend aiming for the top, particularly if you're younger, trying to establish yourself. Typically, that's a lot of people. We read it, and this doesn't reach the bar of novelty, and we will recommend transfer. It's fine. Don't accept the transfer. Pull it. If you want to try the high impact journal, you can pull it from. If you tried Matter, well, we don't have an impact factor yet. But if you tried, say, Jewel, and they recommend transfer to Cell Reports Physical Science, and you want to go higher, it's your prerogative to do that. We are just asking that you trust our editorial decisions. That we've done this before. We kind of know where the papers line up in terms of impact as well, and we only make recommendations if we think it's a good fit for that journal. I don't send everything to Cell Reports Physical Science. Just because it doesn't benefit the authors if I know it can go somewhere else. We don't just fluff up the transfers to get submission numbers up. We only recommend the transfers if we think it's a good fit for that journal. So again, You have to do what's benefit for you. I'd love to say submit everything to Matter, no matter what it is, but it doesn't work that way. And I really do recommend, to try to, if you think you can get into nature, go for nature. But we will gladly consider it if you submit to Matter as well. But if it doesn't reach that bar, then you have to live with that decision as well. Next question. Can you publish research in journals which were presented in conferences as poster presentation earlier? Yes, of course. As long as that conference doesn't have like a proceedings where it was published. So we're fine with it if you gave a talk at a conference or you had a poster at a conference. We will accept the full manuscript. Usually the full manuscript tells the more in-depth story. You might want to change the title or something, because if you Google exact titles and they come up in conference proceedings or something, but we would definitely accept work that has been shown before. That also goes for preprints. We're also very comfortable if your work is on bioRxiv or ChemArchive or Archive. We accept papers that have been up on preprint service as well. The next question. Apart from academics, the professionals who come across many interesting data information, but usually professionals are not able to write or give time for writing. Can somebody guide how to publish or inform if the data is worth publishing? So more from industry, I guess, commercial researchers, professionals. So it's true, it's a different world, and I guess because that kind of research is not citation driven, it's not within the whole game of academic publishing, so it's a little bit different. Again, if it's particular to Matter, you can reach out to a particular journal and ask, is it within the aims and scope? We have published some from independent research labs, materials development, particularly close. We have that map scale, and if it's a 5 or a 6, which is more almost on the product development side, we would be interested in. What we find is most of the stuff that comes out of industry or professionals lacks the novelty that we're really looking for, because it's almost already at the established stage. So it's not driving fundamental research, it's driving commercial research, which is a little bit different game. Now, I am open to more kind of commercial-driven research. It just has, again, it has to be innovative, and it has to, have interest. Why would somebody want to read it? If it ticks those two things, innovation and interest, we would gladly accept it. Again, reach out to anyone on the editorial team. We also have some front matter op-ed type formats that might fit as well, or perspectives. So it's not necessarily a research article, but you can talk about your findings in commercial industrialization or something like that, and that might be of interest as well. Next question. What are the roles of peer reviewers in the final decision? So the peer reviewers, obviously we send out, there. Thank you. The peer reviewers, we assess the reports. The greatest thing that happens is when they're consistent. So, we come in, we like to get 3 reports per paper. And if the 3 reports come in and said, recommend minor revision, recommend minor revision, recommend minor revision, and we look at it and all the minor revisions seem great, that makes our decision easy. We're going to send it back and we're going to recommend minor revision. The problems is when there's discrepancy amongst the reviewers, as you can imagine. So you can have reviewer number 1, minor revision, reviewer number 2, completely unsuitable for its publication, and reviewer number 3 could be, I recommend another journal. So what do you do? So we have to take that as a whole. So it depends. We look at the reasons why they might be rejecting it. If, again, it goes back to if we send it out for review, we liked it for some reason. So if the reviewer number 2 is rejecting because they don't think there's enough conceptual novelty, well, we sent it out because the editorial team thought there was conceptual novelty, so we might override that. It's a case-by-case basis. So the reviewers' reports are probably the most important factor that goes in their decision-making, but we're not bound to that. So just because someone says reject, we're not just going to close our eyes and say, well, that's a reject. Why did they reject it? What's the reasoning behind it? And does that make sense for what we saw in the paper? If there's anything kind of on the bubble, again, that's when we lean on the advisory board, and maybe we have to reach out to someone who's has more expertise in the area, and we'll get their feedback. If we get their feedback, we communicate this with the author. We don't necessarily say who the expert was, but we say the reviewers were, indeterminate, so we reached out to an expert. This is their take, and we try to keep that communication line open. So typically, we try to be transparent in all our decision making, but sometimes the reviewers don't agree with each other, and it's a tricky situation. But we have to trust the process, and usually, I would say 90% of the times, the reviewers, if it doesn't reach that bar, and it's reject, and if it's really good, you'll get minor, maybe major revisions, but you'll get revisions or accept. They're pretty much on pace, and we trust the reviewing process. Next question, is there a maximum time to waste until I heard from the journal? So I'm assuming this is upon submission. So we like to get that first assessment either out for review or reject within 3 days. Sometimes if there's travel, I'm at a conference, not so much anymore because of the pandemic, or if we're really busy or I have an important webinar to give, sometimes that takes a little bit longer. And so sometimes it might be, 5 days, 6 days. If we're hitting the 5-6 day, a working week, and you haven't heard from us, we are late for some reason. So reach out. What happened to my manuscript? We'll get you an answer. So we're trying to do everything within a week. So if it's not out for review or you're not rejected within a week, reach out to us and we will get you a decision almost immediately. Now, once it goes out for review, that's a little bit different. Again, we give 2 or 3 weeks for the reviewers to review, but sometimes they ask for more time. So maybe that can extend to 4 or 5 weeks, depends on how important the review is. If that gets more extended, if you're after waiting about 5-6 weeks and you haven't got the manuscript back from the review, that's about the timeline you should reach out to us as well. Just want an update. We will chase the reviewers, try to make a decision as quick as possible. Next question, does the journal also have word limits for writing a cover letter? There is no word limit for the cover letter, but 1 to 2 pages is probably as most as you want to go. We've literally received cover letters that are 20 pages or more. Cover letters have supplementary information. If your cover letter has supplementary information, you're trying too hard. That's not what it's for. 1 page, I would target 1 page, but if there's a lot of background, a lot of information, a lot of findings maybe, and you need to explain it and it spills over into the second page, 1 to 2 pages is what you should target for the cover letter. Any more than that, and you're moving into the material that's in the paper. We do read the cover letters, but we do read the papers as well. My team definitely reads. We don't just read the cover letter and abstract and look at the figures. We're going to read the paper. So if you're duplicating material, there's no need. Keep it short and sweet, and then we can do that. Next question. If conference proceedings, extended abstract are printed in the booklet, but not a journal, can you publish in a journal later? Not the exact same work. So you have to include more material. It cannot be the same thing that's published in a booklet. Basically, it's hard to say yes or no definitively, because it would be a case by case. But if it's the same work, we cannot take it as it's already published, even though it's a proceedings. So if if the proceedings is, sometimes conference proceedings are a little shorter, it's 2-3 page, almost like a letter, and then you want to do the full study that shows more results, more information, and it has different findings, that's doable, but then it's almost considered a different work. If you're trying to submit the same conference proceedings as a paper, that won't be acceptable. What did you mean when you said the subject of the research should be challenging enough to consider for submitting? Challenging is a bit, let's call it intellectually challenging. It doesn't have to be that you need some fancy equipment or some, it could be a very simple result, a very simple process, a very simple experiment. But it has to be, challenging was probably a poor word there. It has to be intellectually challenging, and it has to be innovative, conceptual advancement. It has to be something that the community has not discovered before. Sometimes new discoveries are very easy, so it doesn't have to be challenging in that respect, but it has to be something that is like, it perks interest and research directions. Aha, like that's something I've never seen before. Now what's the whys and the hows and the whats? So it has to spur innovation and more research. So that kind of challenging, not necessarily a technical challenge. Simpler sometimes is almost better. And very simple findings can spur great ideas. So that was probably misworded. What it really means there is conceptual advancement, novelty. And the last question, how can I find proper journals for my manuscript? What features of the journal should I pay attention to? I would like to say audience. So know your audience and what's the audience of the journal. And again, it comes with a little bit, maybe trial and error, reach out to the editors. But a great indication is, where are you citing in your own manuscript? If most of your citations in your work come from chemistry journals, so, ACS journals or Chem or Trends in Chemistry, something that Cell Press has, or ACS or Royal Society of Chemistry, then you might not want to submit to Matter. It can, but it's a little bit tricky. If most of your citations are from materials journals, so advanced materials, maybe advanced functional materials, materials today, something from Elsevier, carbon, then it'd be a great fit for Matter, because so look at your citations. Other than that, it's reaching out, read the aims and scope. You will find most professors, if you look at their publication history, tend to like, 4 or 5 different journals and stick to those. So what feature? Aims and scope and audience. That's what, if it's a broad audience, the broadest possible audience, you're talking, nature and science. And then you go in matters, material science. And then you can go down to different niche. I say go down, that doesn't mean it's less important or less impactful. It's just a narrower audience. So it all depends on who's going to be interested in your work. So I think we've gone significantly over time. So that was the last question. I thought the questions was great. I'm going to have to give more time for questions. Feel free to reach out to me. Anything, if we didn't cover it today, email, Twitter. I'd love to do more questions. I'm stuck at home in Boston, so I don't go to different conferences anymore because of this pandemic. But if you ever see me out at a conference, introduce yourself, say, I saw your webinar. If you drop my name, I will buy you a drink, a beer, a coffee, whatever you want. So with that, I'm going to sign off for now. It was fun time this morning. So cheers, and submit to Matter and reach out to me. Thank you very much.